All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the user group. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for sticking around after the Cert Jam to spend some time with us for the user group. We're really excited. User groups are obviously designed to bring customers together and really just kind of foster the sense of community amongst our user group. As part of that, we've got a great lineup of speakers for you today. My name is Jason Long. I run one of the teams here at Sumo Logic that's responsible for covering and making sure that the customers in this region of the central United States have everything that they need with regard to Sumo. I'll be kind of the host of the user group, just kind of introducing the speakers, and they'll be kind of really the main part of the event today. So I'll just briefly touch on, we have Rishi, who is on our product management team, going to be talking about some of the things that we're doing to advance the product on the operational and development side. We also have Drew as well, who's going to be teaming up with him on that presentation. We have Eric, who is one of the senior directors of solution engineering here at Sumo, going to be talking a little bit about what we're doing from a product perspective. We have one of our great customers, Tyson from Hudl, who's going to be giving some examples of his use case. And then as well as we have Mitch, who's a corporate relations manager at Food Bank of the Rockies, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about some of the great work that they do there. So as you can see here, we've got the agenda. We're going to go through in that order exactly. We'll have both of our product managers talking here about some of the things we're doing in the product to start, and then move into the use case with Hudl. From there, Mitch will talk about what they're doing over at Food Bank of the Rockies. And of course, we'll have time for Q&A. All right, so we'll just put up the safe harbor statement here for everyone.
Yeah, and Jason, I can just quickly chime in here. So we're going to be talking about product roadmap items that we can't necessarily make commitments on releasing. And so we ask that no purchasing or renewal decisions be made based on the forward-looking information that we're going to share. Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So we'll hand it over to Rishi and Drew, and they're going to kind of walk through some of the things that we're doing on their side of the product. Guys, take it away.
Yeah, great. Hey, thanks a lot, Jason. Appreciate it. And hi, everyone. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes going through a couple slides before we get to the meat. I'm going to hand it over to Rishi here in a minute to do a demonstration. Before we get started on the software delivery performance, just kind of wanted to frame the conversation real quick. So you've probably seen this before, right? You know, 3 core use cases for continuous intelligence at Sumo Logic. Today we're going to be diving into some of the operational intelligence, right? And we have the security intelligence and the business intelligence, right? Software delivery performance, you know, here at Sumo Logic, we're kind of starting to move a little bit further left in the DevOps lifecycle, right? In the CI/CD process. And what we're doing is we're putting together some solutions, right? So Sumo Logic, you got these great business cases here. Swiss Army knife, you know, you've been going through some of the certs and getting familiar with the platform. We've been putting together some solutions that provide a little bit more of a structured, opinionated framework around different operational intelligence approaches, right? And the one I wanted to step through today was around software delivery performance. So let's go ahead and jump into that. I'll kind of walk you through. So for those of you who aren't thinking software delivery performance in and out every day, right? It's a measure of an organization's ability to expedite reliable, secure software. So speed, reliability, and security are kind of the 3 core pieces that you're focused on for software delivery performance. On the next slide, why is software delivery performance important, right? So the highest performing teams win when it comes to it, right? So State of DevOps 2019 report. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may not. Definitely encourage everyone to go check that out. It's an amazing report that the DORA team under Google has put together. They've been doing this for 7 or so years, reaching out to thousands of practitioners across the globe and applying data science to kind of measure the value of software delivery performance. And so there's some really incredible stats here of the kind of highest, elite performing teams compared to lower performers. And next slide. Here are the kind of the core 4 DORA metrics. It's a bit of a tongue twister when it comes to software delivery performance. So I just wanted to step through those real quick. You've got deployment frequency, which is how often code is deployed to production. Lead time, which is the time to go from code commit all the way to production deployment. Shorter is obviously better. Those are kind of the measures of market agility or throughput. And then on the other side, when it comes to reliability, we have MTTR, which is mean time to recovery, how long it takes to recover from production incidents, and a change failure rate, which is the % of deployments that subsequently require remediation. And moving on to the next slide. Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the software delivery intelligence gap. So, when it comes to, modern architectures, serverless, Kubernetes, microservices, moving to cloud or even multi-cloud setups, right? There's definitely a gap in trying to understand from an operational perspective what's going on. That same problem exists, in the software delivery and deployment pipeline, right? So you've got all these different siloed tools that don't easily share data, limited collaboration across teams due to that limited access to data and siloed data. It's really tough to kind of centralize all of this data and monitor and troubleshoot issues across the entire pipeline, because you're typically, stepping through 5, 10, maybe a dozen different open source or third-party tools as part of, planning, managing, building, testing, releasing, and deploying your code. And then, just on top of that, right, lack of data-driven insights to provide you intelligence that you can actually use to optimize performance. And so that's what we've really been focused on here on my team at Sumo. And so on the next slide, I just wanted to briefly kind of cover what we put together. So what we're calling our solution here is a continuous intelligence for software delivery performance. And we're taking our continuous intelligence platform and providing real-time analytics that are going to give you actionable insights to help teams collaborate more effectively and release secure, high-quality code faster. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. And so just kind of going back to the problem statement earlier, right? So what we have, out-of-the-box integrations with the solution that are going to correlate data across these CI/CD tools, right? All of these tools, they're emitting logs, they're all different structures, they're coming at different points in time. The metrics that we looked at earlier, in order to derive some of those metrics, you actually have to pull in data from multiple different tools across this pipeline. And so there's a need to kind of normalize and correlate that data in order to derive these metrics. Obviously, we're doing that in real time. So as soon as the logs come in, we're normalizing and correlating that data and just giving everyone a single place to hop in and monitor, secure, troubleshoot, and optimize their pipeline. Next slide, please. Here's just real quick a mental model kind of thinking about how to leverage the solution. So kind of at the top, the solution is providing these software delivery performance benchmarks, right? And we're benchmarking performance in real time. And then we're taking all of the logs in from all of these third-party tools to give teams the actionable insight they need to kind of close the feedback loop when it comes to, okay, well, now I know what my software delivery performance is. How do I go in and fix it, right? So we're providing visibility into the different stages of the planning, develop, building, test, right, release, deploy processes, and giving you the actual underlying metrics and logs to help you kind of dig down and understand where your bottlenecks are, so that you can focus on those problem areas, right, and tackle the low-hanging fruit when it comes to optimizing your performance. Okay. And from here, I'm going to hand it over to Rishi to kind of provide a little bit of architectural overview of the setup and actually walk through the demo. Go ahead, man.
Sure, thanks, Drew. So our first version of this software delivery performance solution is the Atlassian solution that we made generally available in April, right? So this is one solution that has a bunch of apps and webhooks that I'll talk about in the next slide, that is used to monitor all of your Atlassian tools in your software delivery development lifecycle. Actually, if we go back to the previous slide. Yeah. And then Sumo Logic provides the operational data plane and correlates this data across these tools to give you the insight into the software delivery performance, the 4 metrics that Drew was talking about. Okay. Now you can go to the next slide. And how this works is on the Atlassian side, Atlassian sends data to Sumo. We can get data about what's happening in Jira, Bitbucket, and Opsgenie via webhook notifications. So you can just set up a HTTP source in Sumo Logic, and then plug in that URL in Jira, Bitbucket, Opsgenie to send all the data across to Sumo whenever something happens in those applications, right? And on the Sumo side, then you have apps for each of these technologies. We have apps for Jira Cloud, Jira Server, Bitbucket pipelines, and Opsgenie, right? And over time, we'll keep adding to it. Atlassian Access is another one on the list here. So what happens is, in addition to the apps, we also have the ability to create automated alerts in Opsgenie or issues in Jira via webhook custom webhook connections for both Jira and Opsgenie. And all of this setup for this entire solution, apps, the notifications, the configuration of webhook notifications, both on the Atlassian and the Sumo Logic side, can all be set up via a simple Terraform script that I'll show you in the demo. Okay, I can go to the next slide. And just how this works is we have these 4 apps. This Atlassian app gets all this information gets all the important software delivery performance information and pipeline information from each of these apps and presents it in these overview dashboards, right? One for software delivery performance and the other one to monitor your entire pipeline. Okay. Now with that, I'm going to jump into the demo. So if you can stop sharing, right? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So just referring back to Drew's slide that he presented a few minutes ago about this mental model on how to view this solution, you have performance benchmarks at the top, and you have insights about the pipeline, and then tool-specific analytics for to understand the operations and security of each of these tools, right? So I'm going to just follow the same mental model here in my demo. So I'm going to start off with the software delivery performance dashboard at the top that basically measures software delivery performance across all of your Atlassian tools. First being obviously lead time. So this is the time it takes from when you commit code to it being deployed in production. Now, the advantage we have over here is since we're using Bitbucket and Bitbucket pipelines, it's just one tool, right? We get events, we can easily correlate commit events to deploy events and bring that all together, right? So, so that's what we're doing here for lead time. On time to restore, since we are monitoring Opsgenie, now Opsgenie is an incident management platform. So anytime a P1 incident is created, we get an event. When it's closed, we get an event. And then what we're doing here is we're measuring how long it takes to close a P1 incident, right? The next one is deploys. Now for this, we're using, again, Bitbucket pipelines, and we have a plugin that helps you track all the deploy events because that doesn't come by default with Bitbucket. So that plugin is sending us this data, and then we're able to track deploys over time, deploys over time. The other one is change failure rate, right? So this is the percentage of incidents that are created across all of your changes that are being made to production, right? So here basically means 22 out of 100, if there are 100 changes made to production, 22 of them have some kind of a customer facing incident, right? Which is pretty high. Ideally, it should be less than 10. So we're tracking that, right? So The key piece here in this dashboard is one is the metric itself, and on the right, it's information that tells you what is leading up to this metric, right? So in this case, what are the services deploys by repo and services with the slowest time to restore and so on, right? So that's that top piece here when I talked about software delivery performance benchmarks. The next piece below that, which is your pipeline, is this Atlassian overview dashboard. It gives you an overview of everything that's happening, right? And yeah, everybody wants to first understand, are there any P1 incidents in my pipeline, right? Are there any open P1 alerts? And this is what we're getting from Opsgenie. Show that over here and track them over time. Same thing here, Bitbucket builds. Then you move down, you shift left. What are my failed builds, right? Something that I can click on here, dive into Bitbucket Cloud and understand why this build failed. Then going back one level, your commits over time, right? Understanding how many commits, who's making commits and how many of them are happening over time, as well as pull requests, because here you want to understand your merge requests, your pull request, approval process, and if there are any bottlenecks over there. Now here, all of them pretty much line up, but you will see some, you will most likely see some, delays between a pull request created and a pull request fulfilled event. Okay, so that's when you can say, okay, I need to speed that process up to be able to get the code out faster. And then same thing with Jira. What we're doing is we're tracking created versus closed issues, as well as tracking all the components that have the most open issues. Okay, so that gives you a quick picture of your pipeline. And then what we do is we dive into the tool specific analysis. Right, so here what I'm starting off with is Bitbucket. Again, like Bitbucket here is doing quite a lot, right? It's doing both commits as well as running builds as well as deploys, right? This is Bitbucket Cloud. And you get a quick picture what's happening. It also has the ability to track issues, so you can monitor that if you want through this dashboard. And you see the details of what I was talking about here, your pull request fulfillment process and if there are any gaps over there, right? And then you go on to builds and quickly identify the builds that are having a problem and dive right into that, as well as deploys, right? Now here again, given the fact that Bitbucket is used for both commits and deploys, for any deploy event, I can go back to the associated commit of that deploy. Okay, so that's the advantage you have over here. And then you can go into specifics around builds, failed builds, successful builds, and what's happening right now, as well as deploys. Now, Bitbucket Pipelines again has specific deploys to production, stage, and test. So you can track what's happening in each environment. And then on the Jira side, you get a quick understanding of all the issues. Specifically here, we focused on 3 pieces, right? Issues that are in progress, that have just been closed, and that have been reopened. So you get analytics that tell you how this whole process is working out. And then with Jira again, you can get more details into the issues that took the longest time to close, and that all your issue escalations that happened in the recent past, over the past 24 hours here. Okay. And the final dashboard that I want to show you is the Opsgenie dashboard that tells you how your incident management process is being worked out, is being followed by various folks, by your DevOps or SRE team. Okay. All right. So that's the dashboards that I wanted to talk about. And we've also added these 2 new connections in Sumo Logic. So you can see an Opsgenie and Jira new connection type. I just got to point out that these connections are in beta, but you can talk to your account executive to get them enabled. And they will soon be going GA. So just talking a little bit about Jira, the Jira connection, you can go into the Jira connection and you can use this connection, in fact, to send data to either Jira Cloud Jira Server or Jira Service Desk. And typically what you will do here is once you create the connection, you create a scheduled search that runs ever so often and that can send its results to any one of these three Jira software applications, right? All right, so with that, that's what I want to talk about, what you get when you install the product. But let's talk about the installation itself, right? How does that work? And I'm just going to share this video that shows you what's happening. And then what we're using here is a Terraform script, wherein you basically plug in your Sumo access key IDs and details. And then you tell us if which app you want us to install, right? Jira Cloud, on-prem, Bitbucket Cloud, or Opsgenie. These are the dashboards that I showed you earlier. And then if you want to install, like, for example, one of the webhook connections, the Opsgenie or the Jira webhook connections, and then you go in here and enter in your Jira Cloud or Jira on-prem authentication details. And same thing with Bitbucket Cloud and Opsgenie. Then once you do that, you can go ahead and run Terraform plan to plan the deployment. And here it's telling me that, I'm going to add 16 resources. And then afterwards, I can hit Terraform apply to actually apply all those changes. And then, confirm that I indeed want those changes to be applied. And then it takes about 10 seconds or so, 10, 15 seconds to add all of those resources to both Atlassian and Sumo Logic. So here it's showing you in the collector piece, all the collector itself and the collector sources that were automatically created by the Terraform script. And then we have the Atlassian, all the apps which contain the dashboards are automatically installed for you over here. And this is just showing that we can, all the webhook notifications are automatically configured on the Sumo Logic side. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we can switch back to the slide deck. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Right, so now I talked about the Atlassian solution, which is focused around the tools in the Atlassian suite, right? Dev tools, Atlassian dev tools. But what about the most popular tools that are out there, right? Jenkins, GitHub, PagerDuty. Most of you guys use at least some of these, right? So our goal here is to incorporate these tools and basically build a framework that you can bring any of your tools, right? There are tons of CI/CD tools out there, and we want you to be able to get any one of these, plug in any one of these into the software delivery performance solution, right? So make it generic. So can you go to the next slide, please? Right, and the model here is very similar to what we did with Atlassian. We have apps we have Sumo Logic apps that have out-of-the-box analytics and get the data via webhooks or plugins. For example, in Jenkins doesn't have webhooks, right? So we have a Jenkins plugin that gets data from Jenkins and sends it to us. And then same thing. We want you to be able to automatically configure connections in both in all these tools like Jira, Opsgenie, or PagerDuty. Right? And want this setup to be automated via Terraform, like the Atlassian solution. All right. Can you go to the next slide? All right. So again, here, key items here that we want to do, we want to highlight in this software delivery performance solution are the DORA metrics that Drew was talking about. And here, again, it's really important to note, you might have one team that's, say, for example, using Jenkins, another team is using Circle CI, another team is using another tool, right? Another open source tool. But our goal here is you should be able to bring any tool that you have into as part of the solution, configure it, and then configure the data to match a common schema. And these dashboards should populate automatically across the spectrum of your tool set. So you get that unified view across all of your tools as to how you as an organization are doing with respect to software delivery performance. Okay, and here one thing that we're going to expand on. I showed a little bit of that in the Atlassian solution, but for each of these metrics, we're going to have like a drill down dashboard that gives you even more data about what's contributing to lead time, deployment frequency, and so on. Okay, can move to the next slide. Again, same thing on the pipeline side of things, where we're gonna call out these 7 major pieces of each phase of your development life cycle: issues, tests, commits, deploys, alerts, builds, and release. So one new thing over here compared to the Atlassian solution is your tests, right? We want you to be able to track all of your tests, which are successful, which are failed, which environment is it running in, which service, which team, and so on. Okay. So with that, I'll pause for questions. Any questions about what Drew and I talked about regarding software delivery performance?
Feel free to unmute and chime in if you do have a question.
Yep, and don't be shy. We're this is something that we're iterating on, and we're building actually right now, Rishi and team. So we're definitely interested in any feedback, and anyone out there, if you have any interest in the solution, offline, also don't hesitate to reach out to one of the panelists or to your account rep. So we'd love to show you more as well.
Hey Drew, it looks like we've got one question in the chat from Jonathan. Do you integrate with Team City? Is his question.
So not yet. We're focusing on the most popular tools right now. But when the software this SDP or software delivery performance solution is live, you can bring in any tool, including Team City. So we're designing it in such a way that you just bring in the data and tweak the data to conform to the unified schema, and these dashboards should automatically light up. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks.
and if the follow up was, do you also support Octopus Deploy? Then same answer. I know those two play nice together. So.
We'll pause for just another second in case anyone's typing a question or has anything come to mind. Rishi and Drew, thank you so much for the hard work that you guys have both done on this. I'm super excited. I know personally we have a lot of customers that use the Atlassian suite, as well as a ton of the other different products that you had mentioned there to kind of tie it all together. And I think it's something that will be really great for our customers as we kind of shift a little bit more left from that operations focus to being more in the software delivery and life cycle. So thank you for the work that you guys have done, and appreciate you walking through everything that we're working on here. With that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. We have Eric von der Linden, who is one of our senior directors of solution engineering on the security side. And he's here to talk a little bit about some of the great things that we're doing on the security side, which is an area that, if you haven't talked with your recently with your Sumo Logic account executive or account manager, we have been investing really heavily in this side of the product over the last couple of years. And so Eric's going to highlight some of the great things we're doing there. Eric?
Thanks, Jason. You're able to hear me, correct?
Yep, you're good to go.
Excellent. All right, so thank you everyone for spending a few minutes with us here. So again, to Jason's point, Sumo Logic has invested heavily into the space. So with the acquisition of JASK in last November, we've actually gone through a pretty intensive process of integrating JASK into the Sumo Logic platform, and we'll talk about some of those integration points. But today marks actually another point in that roadmap that brings us to a unified platform where You can go to one spot and be able to see all of your IT ops, DevOps, and SecOps information in one platform. And as you can imagine, that becomes a very powerful story. And especially when you start to consider the data that is collected has considerable overlap. And so it's not uncommon for us as part of the discovery process to ask a simple question of, hey, where's your security data? Where is your IT ops or DevOps data? And how much of it is the same? And you'd be surprised at how much overlap there is. So getting a little bit to this slide in terms of platform integration, some of the things that we've been working on, and a couple of them just actually went live today, unified single sign-on, right? So you sign into one, it signs you into everything. So it now is just a inside your Sumo application. It is a link to Cloud SIEM Enterprise. Click on it, and it pops open the Cloud SIEM Enterprise functionality right there within the Sumo application. You know, it's consistent with what we've been working towards over the last few months, in the last month or so, the unified ingest of all the data into the core platform. So now the former JASK collections have been rerouted, right? So everything actually goes through Sumo. So again, one single place for all data to go, makes it very easy to be able to support multiple use cases and not have to have a separate set of collections as part of it. We're moving towards in a lot of the security and compliance aspects of the core platform. So as you can imagine, when you bring two separate systems together, you know, step one is integrating, two is then inheriting all of the security controls. If you've seen a Sumo presentation late, the security aspect is quite impressive. Coming from a risk management background, not only the attestations of HIPAA and PCI, but also the fact that we're down a path with FedRAMP moderate, even down the level of a roadmap to FedRAMP high, which is very difficult to achieve. Easy process, but that is something that, you know, we're looking to accomplish as part of the overall platform this year, and then a lot of those will you know, be revalidated for Cloud SIEM Enterprise shortly after, because they weren't necessarily in scope at the time. Also, expansion of regions. So today, Cloud SIEM Enterprise lives in 3 spots, Canada, US, and Frankfurt, Germany. There is conversation around opening this up to other regions of the world. Again, a lot of that's going to be driven on demand, but, you know, looking at Asia Pac as well as India and some of the other countries that have expressed interest in Cloud SIEM Enterprise. So in terms of security investments, in terms of detection enhancements, we just completed a very extensive migration from our old rules engine to our new rules engine, which is called Radar, and it continues to evolve, allowing for, you know, better stateful / threshold rule support, as well as chaining. So actually, you have some very interesting use cases that have been modeled from some of our customers, allowing for us to do things that haven't historically been feasible with traditional platforms. One of the things in mind, where we get a running 14-day total of data, I can get very complex in terms of how many rules I can chain together over a period of time to detect some of those low and slow type attacks, and looking for things that may span multiple technologies, right? So it becomes very powerful in terms of being able to detect things within your environment that you otherwise have, but just had no way of necessarily pulling out in a meaningful fashion. And so whether you've already built alerts in the core platform, which you'll see here listed as CI platform, those can be ingested into Cloud SIEM Enterprise. So if I have threshold alerts that I'm interested in, that I want to be built into my rule modeling, I can take those. Vice versa, I can actually pump the data back into you know, the core dashboards, right? So if I want to track my signals, my insights, you know, time to resolution, right? I want to even do something down to the level of network blocks and understanding, you know, high criticality assets, what's PCI, what's phishing, et cetera, right? There's several use cases that are supported in terms of the data being readily available for all parties to be able to use. Huge push on it continues with AWS, Azure, and GCP. We just released a large pack of rules and detections for GCP. Actually, I say we just released it. It's in a couple of our POV environments. It will be moving out as a production build here shortly, but we continue to look at use cases around AWS. There's a heavy focus around privilege escalation, unauthorized access, superhuman access capabilities, right? Where, why is it that Eric logged in from Boston and then from Sydney within 2 hours of each other, right? So some of those standard use cases that people see but have struggled with, those will continue to be areas of focus for our content team as we build out additional content. And again, one of the benefits here is the seamless integration of being able to monitor your cloud systems as well as your legacy systems on premise. You still retain the ability for custom mappings and with validation. So we do publish rule sets that are running across the enterprise, but you do have the ability to modify it based on your level of risk or your environment. But also, and sort of jumping around here, that ability to, from a rule prototyping perspective, before I actually put a rule into place, let me get an understanding. Is this going to fire one time? Is it going to fire 1,000,000 times, right? Without end up ruining all the insights and signals that are generated within my environment. So a little bit of flexibility to play around and start to be creative, right? Without having to worry about, hey, what am I going to do to my environment? So as we move to investigation management, automation response, so a lot of conversations with Forrester and Gartner, talking a little bit about how we continue to integrate with SOAR systems, but that ability to pivot and do record search without ever leaving the interface, right? Obviously, something that's very important to an analyst. We continue to build out enrichment functions so that the analyst never has to even look at something. So a couple of use cases that we've seen a lot of success with, hey, who was logged onto the system at this time, right? Leveraging PowerShell commands that can pull user information back automatically, as well as being able to pull back the likes of information from Carbon Black, as well as CrowdStrike and others to further enrich some of the information that we've received. Again, just makes it easier for the analyst to live in one spot without having to pivot to multiple systems. Additional SOC team investigation management collaboration options, right? So, how do I, treat this in a SOC environment? How do I have multiple people working on this, right? That ability to be able to take notes, be able to assign to different systems, how to build automated actions and integrations. So, we've had some interesting integration requests with some the up and coming SOAR providers. So we do a lot of that SOAR, initial SOAR functionality, but then how do we take it to the next level and give it to a system that's going to take an automated action? And then last but not least, probably one of the more important ones, advanced reporting. So within the last 3 months, I've seen more reports generated than I think I've seen in my 2 years of working with the system. And some really interesting ones, right? That will give you a lot of insight as to some of the threats that exist within your environment. We actually had a customer who, as part of the POV, started building their own reports, and without anyone ever looking at it, right? They just looked at the Sumo environment, said, "Hey, this is pretty simple." They started building reports, and they came to find out that it was one data center overseas that generated over 85% of their threats. And for them, that was an eye-opening experience that, hey, we've always had that information. We had no ability to understand, where we were spending all our time. We thought that we spent our time here, but now we had hard proof, which allows them to go up to their leadership and say, hey, we need better controls in this data center to prevent us from spending this much time on it. So you'd be surprised at what you can glean from the data that we're collecting. When you look at what Sumo Logic is in this integration, right, it really is about the data, right? Let's land it in one spot. Let's use it multiple times, right? And let's enable our analysts as well as others to be better with the information they have. So with that, Jason, I'll open it up to any questions. Otherwise, I am going to hand the microphone back over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. We're super excited about what y'all are doing over there on the Cloud SIEM front to advance where we're going with the security piece of the product. I'm monitoring the Q&A here in the chat. Not seeing anything yet, but does anyone in the audience have any questions for Eric about anything we're doing on the security side? So anyone would like to get more information on this, you can very easily log on to our website. We have some information there, of course, as well as getting in touch with your Sumo Logic account executive and customer success engineer. That would be probably the easiest way to continue to get a little bit more information about this. At this time, it doesn't look like there's any questions that I'm seeing in the chat here. So thank you very much, Eric, for kind of walking us through everything that you're doing. And again, just really excited for all the new advancements that they're constantly coming out of that side of the company. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. I'm really excited to introduce Tyson Stewart. Tyson is the Director of Engineering at Hudl. He heads up the product stack group over there and has been with Hudl for almost 10 years, 9 years now, and has been a Sumo user for quite some time as well. I believe they got started with their Sumo journey back in 2015. So he's been kind enough to put together a presentation on some of the things that they're doing with the platform over there and how they're making use of it. So with that, Tyson, I'll hand the mic over to you.
Jason, just to check in real quick, I believe there were a few last-minute changes made to the presentation. Would you mind starting and stopping just one time to pick those up?
I'm not the share right now, but it looks like we're getting that going.
Awesome.
Thanks, Stacy. I appreciate that. Nothing like last-minute changes.
Does that look okay, Stacy? We're good to go?
If we're good with Tyson, we're good to go.
Fantastic. All right. Take it away, Tyson.
Cool. Thank you. You want to move to the next slide? So there's 8 bullet points here. They'll go quick, I promise. So I'll talk a little bit about Hudl, who we are, and then I'm going to talk through briefly through our infrastructure and our distributed systems, who uses Sumo Logic at Hudl, our use cases, why we chose Sumo Logic, and the value we received out of it. So would you advance? Our mission statement at Hudl is to help teams and athletes win. If you go to the next slide, please. We're at the intersection of technology and sports at Hudl. We try to build a product that helps our users, which are coaches, analysts, and athletes, and give them the insights that they need to improve themselves. You can see on this slide some of the logos of the teams that we work with. We're proud to say that we work with some of the best across the world. Every team in the English Premier League uses Hudl. Every team in Major League Soccer, nearly every team, I'm sorry. We have 29 out of 30 of the NBA teams using us, all of the Australian rules football team, and 18 of 20 of the Chinese Basketball Association. Next slide, please. Go ahead and skip this one if you would. And this one, thanks. So we got our start in 2008 and we started in American football, and proud to say that 12 years later, we still have 98% of the American high school football market. Across the world, we have 35 sports that use us. We concentrate on about 5 of them. Basketball is our largest sport, and we have 40,000 active basketball teams, as well as some of these other vanity metrics. Next slide, please. So let me talk just a little bit about our technology layers. So this is obviously very high level. We use a lot of different things, but I wanted to use it to introduce that we've gone through 3 major iterations of our platform, starting with a monolithic architecture, moving to distributed systems, and now we're on to distributed systems and containers. In those first 2 iterations, we were heavily dependent on Windows. Our databases and our web servers themselves were all based on Windows. The move to containers, we've moved to Linux as a host, and we kind of hope to phase that out. We're big believers in Nginx. We use that for our application routing, and are proud to use it. From the beginning, since 2008, we've been with Amazon, and we've actually at this point built up some legacy that means that we have to actually try to move away from, which is a little bit new to us. We've used PagerDuty for a decade, and we invested pretty heavily in MongoDB around 2011. So we've been heavy users of it for a while too. Next slide. So as I kind of mentioned there, largely based in in our history, full instances, we've moved on to containers. And so at this point, we're about half and half, old instances and new containers. So over the next basically 2 years, our plan is to move fully into containers, as well as start adopting newer technologies like Amazon EKS, an application mesh, and probably, you can see there on the left, Netflix was an early adopter of Amazon as well, and so we looked to them for a lot of things. And when we first started getting into a distributed architecture, we used their Eureka project for our application registry, and we kind of hope to move away from that. I'm not even sure if Netflix themselves are using it at this point. So obviously going forward, Sumo Logic is going to play a big part in that, and it's been fun to see them fully embrace technologies like Kubernetes and Terraform as well. Those are areas that we're just now really getting into. Next slide, please. So at Hudl, we believe in the generalist principle. Our product team is made up of people who are, they do have disciplines, but we really expect them to grow beyond those disciplines and practice in a lot of different areas. And so Sumo Logic is used heavily by developers and engineers, of course, but also by our quality analysts, by our customer success team, and even leadership at Hudl. Those are some of just the big users that use it. Next slide. And what are the big things that we use it for? Well, the big one's probably operational and analytics. We have a lot of dashboards that we've built. We have extensive alerting setup, and we also use it for some customer analytics and quality assurance. Next slide. So why did we choose Sumo Logic? Well, one of the big ones was scalability. When I started at Hudl, we were just getting into using Splunk, and at the time they didn't have a cloud offering. And I was the one that got the responsibility of running the system. And over the course of the next couple of years, it grew to a big portion of my job. And we reached a point where we wanted to know, are we going to just make this a full-time position that I'm going to do, or can we invest in a company outside of ourselves that will actually do this for us? And obviously we chose the latter. Sumo Logic came along at a really great time for us, and I'm ever so grateful that I didn't become a Splunk admin. We also obviously appreciate the unlimited, unrestricted search capability. We use it extensively. And that last point about the seasonality, because our business is, we're so heavily involved with American football, we tend to be seasonal. Basketball's also grown, obviously, over the last few years. And so when we first started engaging with Sumo Logic, our usage explodes during the fall season. And I think we even maybe challenged Sumo Logic a little bit in their early days, but they were able to meet that expectation. And it's just been a great relationship. Next slide, please. So some of the value that we get, I kind of touched on this a little bit. One of the big ones is ops visibility. We've built a lot of dashboards. It's our first go-to place when we're trying to resolve incidents, even when they come from other systems, like metric systems, that sort of thing. We turn to search to understand what our users were doing at the time, what the state of the servers were, looking through those trace logs, that sort of thing. And so it gives us a lot of information about what happened during incident resolution. We also use it to analyze patterns among our users and how they're using the platform. And during rollouts in particular, we'll be keeping an eye on those patterns as we roll out a brand new feature and start ramping it up, turning it on for more and more users. It's probably familiar to you, but obviously we use it for debugging because we typically don't have access to those production servers for audit purposes. And so typically we encourage our developers to add a lot of debug logs so that we can turn those on and off as we need them. And then last but not least, of course, is our relationship with Sumo Logic. As you mentioned, we've been in a relationship with them for 5 years, and we've had a great relationship. We meet with them multiple times a year, and they've just been really, really helpful to us. And kind of sped through it. That's about all I've got. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Tyson. No, it's great. It's great to hear, and really appreciate you kind of walking through. I will monitor the Q&A here, And if anyone has a question, please feel free to chime in. You know, I'm curious about one thing. You had mentioned one of your use cases was customer analytics, and you also talked a little bit about understanding usage patterns. Could you perhaps share a little bit more about what you mean on the customer analytics side and kind of what you guys are getting out of that, how it helps?
Yeah, you bet. So I will be pretty transparent. We're at a point where we would like to go to more structured logging, and we aren't there yet, but we have a kind of a deeply embedded logging culture, which you probably gleaned from my presentation. And so a lot of those usage patterns are just strict logs that we just send to Sumo Logic. And so we have over time relied on those to tell us what is happening, what our users are actually doing via the calls that they're making, basically. And we like I said, we still do that, especially when we were first rolling things out. Now, as we've advanced over time, we've started feeding those for long-term storage into our data lake, and so they live in a place, and we have tools built on top of that. But even that was something that Sumo Logic gave us the ability to do. You know, the feature to ship those logs off to S3 is what made that possible.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. It's always interesting to hear. And one other thing that I have to ask, I'm curious about, is you mentioned that your most busy part of the year is in the fall. Obviously, with football, you have so many different, you know, NCAA, college football, the NFL, a lot going on. What is there like a specific time in the fall? Is it like NFL training camp when they're watching a ton of film, or is it just generally the fall that you see your peak usage for the year?
You know, it's it's a great question. We do we skipped over one of the slides that I had, that we do work with teams all the way from the youth clear up into the elite. And so you'd like to think, well, those are the big customers, those premier leagues, the ones who are, you know, like your elite colleges who are playing in the fall and that sort of thing, that are using the Hudl the heaviest. But, you know, in the NFL, there's only 32 teams. But there are over 20,000 American football teams in high school level. And so they're the ones who actually push us. So the heaviest time for us is midway through August through about the first weekend in September, when all the teams are just coming on board, their seasons are just starting. And it's a really exciting time actually in the company when those first few weeks, it's just like starting school again. I think, you know, however you feel about it, it's something new and different, and the attitude just changes.
Got it. That's cool. I can imagine, you know, all the individual players and the coaches logging in, watching film, trying to understand how to get better. So anyway, it's cool. What you guys do over there is really unique and interesting, and we kind of appreciate you. Obviously, being a customer, we appreciate your business and your partnership that we've had with you over the last 5 years, and also the just your ability to jump on here and talk to some of the other folks here in the room who are in a similar seat about what you're doing with Sumo. So, you know, I didn't see any other questions in the Q&A. So I just want to thank you again, Tyson. We appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Awesome. So I wanted to introduce Mitch. So for everyone, one of the core values at Sumo Logic is that we're in it with our customers. And for us, we extend that also to mean that we're in it with our community. And so for us here, we have our HQ2 is based out of Denver. And that's where I'm physically located, and we have a large amount of the team here. And so we wanted to invite Mitch on to talk about some of the work that they're doing in our community, and just kind of highlight that aspect. So with that, Mitch, I'd like to just go ahead and hand over the mic to you.
Very good, Jason. Thank you. And I thank everyone here at Sumo Logic for allowing us this time and being a supporter and a partner of ours as we are nourishing families out there. And as you might imagine, right now, there are more than we've ever seen. So as you're looking at this beautiful shot of the mountains in one of our trucks, I can tell you the Food Bank of the Rockies has been around since 1978. And like most food banks across the country, it arose pretty organically. It was just several citizens who were scratching their head thinking, well, there's got to be a better way. If we have food out there that could be going to waste, if grocery stores feel they need to throw out because of liability issues, certainly we should be able to gather that and get it to people. And so that's what the food banking system does. And one of the first steps was to change some laws, both within states and nationally, to make sure that those grocery companies were not liable necessarily for products that may have a sell date of, say, tomorrow. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that our service area is quite vast. We're the section in yellow. So we cover 30 counties across Colorado, mostly the northern half, as you can see, in the entire state of Wyoming. So those trucks in Wyoming get a workout. They put in about 133,000 miles on average every year. The other areas in Colorado, different colors, the white that says Larimer, and then the Weld in green, and Boulder in purple, and then the southern half. Those are the other 4 food banks. Together, all 5 of us work together. We don't compete. And sometimes on the news, you hear the phrase, feeding Colorado. Well, that's the 5 of us. We all started off pretty small, and we grew up and up and up, and we took on more territory. And so the 5 of us make sure that every inch of Colorado is covered. But as you can see from the yellow there, Food Bank of the Rockies is the largest of the 5. If you go to the next slide, you can get a better idea of the number of people, the lives we touch. And this is, by the way, before COVID-19, and there are even more people now. So we serve more than 400,000 people annually. That top slide is our warehouse where I'm sitting today, and is where we use we distribute our food. It's not really a holding center. It moves pretty fast. We turn 70 million pounds of food out every year. That's one food bank. That's a lot to get your head around. So we converted that to meals. And you can see in the graphic there, we provide 56 million meals every year. Now, some of that's food that's perishable, non-perishable, but we also have a kitchen and we prepare some meals. And that slide there in the bottom where you see that's Paul, and he is our chef. And so we provide 145,000 meals every day. And that's go out to children, to seniors, and to families. If you think about schools and maybe areas that have free and reduced lunch programs, as soon as that school is out, where are those kids getting those meals? They may be missing out on 1 or 2 meals a day. So what we've done is partner with the Boys and Girls Club. They're great partners. And we said, look, usually they have a clubhouse in one of those areas where we see a free and reduced lunch children population. If we prepare the food and we deliver the food and we put it and we provide the heaters and the coolers so that the food stays just right, could you serve it? And they said, absolutely. So we do that at each and every day. If you go to the next slide, we can get a better idea of how far that money goes. And so we can take $1 and basically provide 4 meals. That's a full meal. That's not like just 1 waffle and a grape. It's a real deal meal. And so we can take 96 cents of every dollar, and that goes towards food distribution. Now we only have, even though we cover half this, Colorado and then all of Wyoming, we only have about less than 120 volunteers, or I should say employees. And so people say, how in the world do you do that? Well, we do it with partners like Sumo Logic, and also because of volunteers. And if you go to the next slide, you can see during the normal fiscal year, in 2018, for example, we had 23,000 volunteers in this warehouse. They donated 123,000 hours. So for us, that's like having 60 full-time employees. And the picture you see there, our friends at Arden Mills, and they were all here at the same time. Well, now with COVID-19, a little tough to have them that close together. So if you go to the next slide, we've changed things up. These are folks from Amazon, and they came in, this is just a couple of weeks ago. This is some photographs that I took, and now we have them wearing masks and gloves, and they're socially distanced. So our food demand is up, yet our volunteer core is down somewhat. If you go to the next slide, you can see that one of the ways we distribute the food is not only through food pantries, but also mobile food pantries. You can see this is one of our semi trucks. We work with churches and rec centers that say, hey, can we use your parking lot on every other Thursday or every other Wednesday, whatever it may be. And then people can line up and receive food, and it's all self-declared. We're not quizzing people or whether they lost their job. But as you can see from this model, people would be standing too close together during COVID-19. So if you go to the next slide, we changed it to a drive-through, and it worked. The first time we did it during this COVID-19 crisis, of course, it rained and snowed on us, but we still pulled it off. If you go to the next slide, you can see this is one of our big distributions. That's in Power Field at Mile High, where the Broncos play in the background. And we set up that morning at about 8 a.m. We put the word out on social media and through television stations that we'd be ready to open at 9. We figured we might get to 2 o'clock. We went to 2:30 before we finally ran out of food. And we served about 30,000 different families. We had a drive-through and also a walk-through. So what's in those boxes exactly of the food? Well, if you look at the next slide, what we're proud of is that the largest percentage of the food that we distribute is fresh produce. We have wonderful partnerships with our grocery partners like Safeway and Kroger and Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh, and also with farmers and organic farmers across Colorado and Wyoming. So that's the largest percentage of food. Sometimes when people think of the food bank, they think, oh, you guys just must take those dented soup cans no one buys at the grocery store and give those out. That's actually a small percentage, but we do rescue some of that food, and most of it is fresh produce. If you go to the next slide, you can see that it's also new food. So the grocery partners are getting very good to us. They're one of their pillars of giving is, of course, hunger. And so they provide some great product. And when we look on our computer system, when we see we're missing something, maybe we're low on butter or chicken breasts or celery or V8 juice, then we buy it. And we buy it at a wholesale level. And that's why we can make that dollar go farther and farther. And as you can see, it's just like the food you and I would buy, and it has a long shelf life. You go to the next slide if you could. So here's where we get the food. Of course, we're a member of Feeding America. That's just a network of food banks, 200 plus across the country. We all help each other, work with one another. Most of the food, as you can see, is grocery rescue, about a third of that. We purchase some, that's about 13%. Food drives help us out. But here's how COVID has changed things. The supply chain challenges that we're seeing and you see in the news right now, that does impact us. Because as we turn to our grocery partners, sometimes there are some items where they go, oh boy, we're running low on those right now, so we can't provide that much. That requires us to go out and buy more. And so right now we're spending significantly more than we might otherwise do just to make sure we have good selection. If all of us together ran a food pantry, we wouldn't want to just give you food and say, here, eat it and send that to people. We let the food pantries go online and order what they think the folks in their neighborhoods would enjoy. Do you want lentil beans? Do you like V8 juice? Do you need more celery? Do you like tortillas? They know what they'd like to eat because we want a nice, well-rounded diet. And we want food that they're going to eat, so they eat it and it doesn't go to waste. So if you go to the next slide, if you could, you can see that because of that, especially that grocery rescue, we keep 18 million pounds of food out of the landfill. That's just Food Bank of the Rockies. One food bank. That much food is kept out of the landfill. Almost 15 million meals. Not long ago, I had a company in town and they made a sports energy drink. And they had got to the end of their product run. And they were changing their label, changing some ingredients. And it was kind of high-end stuff. And they said they were going to get rid of it. And I said, what are you doing with it? And they said, well, you know what? We don't have a trucking company. We were going to hire a trucking company, pay them $2,000 and haul it to the dump. I said, no. Here's what we can do. What's the shelf life? Oh, it's good till 2022. We just don't want it on the shelf because we're changing things. So we sent a truck over to them, grabbed 17 pallets of that sports energy drink, and it was low in sugar, lots of vitamins, and we got it out to those boys and girls clubs, and those kids loved it. So we have those kinds of stories all the time where we rescue perfectly good food that, 50 years ago or so, a lot of folks might have just thrown to the dump, and we keep that out and get it to folks who need it. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we get 4 stars from Charity Navigator. For those of you who may know about that, but it's kind of like a BBB, Better Business Bureau for charities. It's a great way to see if a charity you're interested in does well, uses its money wisely. You can score a maximum of 100 points. If you score between 95 and 100, you get 4 stars. As you can see there, for the last 10 years, we've scored 96 points or higher. We're very proud of that. So we're lean, mean, and we get the job done, serving an awful lot of people. If you head to the next slide, you can see that's one of our families there on the right and some of the folks we serve. A lot of times I think when people think of a food bank, they think, oh, that's not really meant for me. No, it's meant for anyone who needs food. And so this day and age, during COVID, about a third of the people we're seeing at these food pantries, again, we serve 690 of them across Colorado and Wyoming. That's anything from a tiny little church to something the size of the Denver Rescue Mission and everything in between. And a third of the faces we're seeing at those food pantries right now, we've never seen before. All kinds of families that didn't think that they needed the services of a food pantry or a food bank are now using it. So that's the good news. The sad news is we're seeing more people, but the good news is the system works. We've got the food, and we can get it to the people who need it. And during a crisis like this is exactly where we can shine. And we can do that, again, thanks to folks like you who may donate just a few dollars a month or come in as a Sumo Logic team and volunteer at our facility. So I'll open it up to questions rather than talk on infinitum and see if you guys have any questions about how we work, who we serve. Anyone?
Thanks, Mitch. I'm monitoring the Q&A here, and anyone please feel free to chime in if you have questions. I have one. What's the easiest path if a person was motivated and wanted to go on and make a donation? How would I do that?
You could do just like you see on the slide there, foodbankrockies.org. It's foodbankrockies.org. And when you get to that opening page, you'll see several things. You'll see one, how you can find food near you. And again, since we serve 690 pantries, I'll bet you there's 3 or 4 pantries around every one of you. You may not know that they're there. They could be in a little church or a little rec center, but they're all around you. Also at foodbankrockies.org, you can find, that's where you can sign up to volunteer if you wish. And we do adhere to social distancing. During normal times, we'd have about 100 people or more in the warehouse where I'm sitting, volunteering, putting those food orders together for those food pantries. And we've scaled it back down to about 25 or so. And we're 108,000 square feet. So think of us like a Costco on steroids. Just because of its sheer size, we can keep you distanced and keep you safe if that appeals to you. And also at foodbankrockies.org in that opening page, you can see a place to donate. And again, since we can take $1 and providing 4 meals and do so quickly, it's any donation is helpful. So we appreciate any support.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mitch. I know during this time with the health crisis and the economic crisis, there are plenty of people who are less fortunate than us that are calling on your services now more than ever. So we appreciate the good work that you do for our community. A couple of the things that I took away that I didn't know before that were pretty amazing to me is the amount of food that you actually keep out of the landfill. And I think that's obviously food waste is, what's the point of that when there are people out there going hungry? And the fact that you guys can stretch $1 that far and still provide, square meals to folks, I think is amazing. So again, just thank you so much for the work that you do. And if anybody on the line feels so inclined, please feel free to visit their website down there at foodbankoftherockies.org.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Again, this time last year, sometimes I had a hard time convincing folks in the community that 1 in 10 Coloradans faces food insecurity. In other words, they don't really know where their next meal's coming from. And you think about this time last year, the economy was doing great. Colorado is wonderful. And they're really 1 in 10 in Colorado? Yes. And that's why I used this picture in this last slide. That's the face. It's folks just like you and me. They get themselves in a jam. They may have both lost jobs. One's facing some high medical bills. And so what we find is that families sometimes will skip the kid's dentist appointment or maybe put off making a house payment. So what we're saying is, look, the food's there. We have a system, a giant trucking system to get you the food. Let's take that worry off the table, no pun intended. And so you can focus on those other things. So if you ever find someone who's got themselves in a pickle like that, remind them that that's what the food bank system is for. Sometimes we think, oh, it's probably just for some of the inner city who's homeless. Sure, we help the homeless, but that's only about 7 to 10%. Most folks are folks just like you and me. They may be working. Could think about the service industry and expensive mountain towns who have been laid off. These are the folks we're serving right now because, again, the food's there.
Wow. Yeah, you don't think about that. But it's eye-popping from a statistical perspective. And again, we just really appreciate it, Mitch, and thanks so much for coming on and talking a little bit about the work that y'all are doing out in the community.
Thank you, Jason, for the opportunity. Thank you to Sumo Logic for your support. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that brings us to the end of the planned content that we had today for the user group. We'll just go ahead and open it up. If there are any final questions or any things that are coming through that anyone's curious about, I'll just take a quick look at the Q&A here, but just keep in mind that anything Sumo Logic related, feel free to reach out to your customer success manager and your Sumo Logic account executive. Again, we just want to say thank you to all of the participants and all of the presenters today for coming on, and really appreciate everyone's partnership here with Sumo. Looking forward to seeing you in here at the next user group. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.